So a little over a month ago, I made a video where I was essentially explaining what the ideal Justice League roster would be in the DCU. And ever since I made that video, the idea of what the MCU Avengers roster would be post Secret Wars has always been something that's lingered in my mind. And for those of you who don't know, yes, it has officially been confirmed that the MCU is undergoing a soft reboot after Avengers Secret Wars, and a lot of characters that died in the pre-existing MCU will be returning with new actors being cast in the roles. So personally, what I predict is that even though this is being dubbed a soft reboot, pretty much everyone who was introduced into the MCU prior to Phase 4 will be recast, and only some of the major events that happened in the MCU will remain canon in this new MCU. And this to me just makes the most sense because of how certain character stories ended in the MCU. With characters like Tony Stark and Captain America Steve Rogers, we effectively saw their books being closed, with Iron Man obviously dying at the end of Endgame, and Steve going back in time to live with Peggy. Obviously, I'm sure that these things are going to be revisited in Avengers Secret Wars and Doomsday, but if Kevin Feige already confirmed that both Captain America Steve Rogers and Tony Stark will be returning to the MCU post Secret Wars, in my opinion, there's no way that their actual endings could still be canon to their current characters post reboot. So I know this idea might shock a lot of you guys, but I wholeheartedly believe that a lot of the MCU just simply will not be canon in the new rebooted MCU. I'll dive more into that topic in a later video because I do plan on doing an Avengers saga. Let me know in the comments if you guys want that. But very quickly before we get into this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share if you enjoy the content, and also hit that hype button if you guys have that feature available. Diving right into the topic at hand, I think that because of the fact that the MCU is rebooting after having a ton of experience with the pre-existing MCU, they now have the opportunity to start out this soft reboot with a bang and start off doing things very comic accurate. And in my opinion, they could perfectly start that trend with the Avengers roster. This brings me to the first member on the team, and that member is none other than Ant-Man Hank Pym. In the comics, Ant-Man Hank Pym is very pivotal to the formation of the Avengers, and he's one of the most crucial members of the team. This is an element of the Avengers that we were completely robbed of in the pre-existing MCU because of the fact that we got Scott Lang Ant-Man on the team, and he didn't come until post-Civil War. Because of this, we don't get to see the flawed, obsessive, brilliant mind that Hank Pym is in his prime, and we also got the very crucial change to Ultron's lore, which was instead of him being Hank Pym's creation, he was actually Tony Stark's creation. And a lot of people don't actually know that because of the fact that the MCU is what introduced a lot of people to the Avengers. So not only does including Hank Pym on the team in his prime give us the opportunity to explore Ultron in the proper way in the future of this rebooted MCU, it also gives him the opportunity to interact with a lot of heroes while he's in his prime. So we could see him interact with the other intellectual superheroes in the MCU like Black Panther or Reed Richards, even his own teammate in Tony Stark. And seeing Hank be around for the team's largest battles like Thanos or Kang the Conqueror, in my opinion, is just something that the MCU shouldn't miss out on this time around. Piggybacking off of the inclusion of Hank Pym Ant-Man, I now have his wife, Janet Van Dyne. And this one is obviously a no-brainer because you can't have Ant-Man without his wife, Wasp. Like Hank Pym, Janet was also a founding member of the Avengers in the source material, so much so that she literally named the team. For me, like I already said, this is something that I personally would like to see in the MCU in the future. And seeing the original power couple of the Avengers in Ant-Man and Wasp is something I think is pivotal to the overall team's development. Now we're starting to get into the larger names of the team, and that brings us to the man himself, Steve Rogers. Captain America Steve Rogers personally needs to be on every single main Avengers lineup. Cap is consistently depicted as the spirit and leader of the team, and I think that that dynamic is something that should heavily be focused on in every mainline Avengers adaptation. And when I say mainline, I mean like main Avengers roster, so not like the Dark Avengers or the other factions of the Avengers, the main team. And with us having a more traditional comic accurate roster in the future of the MCU, we can see him clash with characters like not only Tony Stark, but also Hank Pym now. And even though Captain America is one of the Avengers that were very fleshed out in the pre-existing MCU, I still do believe that there's a lot to dive into when it comes to his story and his mythos. Individually, with Captain America's Rogues Gallery, I think going more in depth with characters like Baron Zemo or Red Skull would make a lot of sense in this new MCU. And we could also get introduced to characters like Nuke, who are very prominent Captain America villains, and we could also see him go up against the likes of Taskmaster. And as a team, we still haven't seen Cap and the Avengers go up against the likes of Kang the Conqueror, like I mentioned earlier. We haven't seen him face off against the likes of Galactus. We haven't seen him interact with other street level characters like Daredevil, Iron Fist, Taskmaster, like I already mentioned, the Punisher, etc. So Captain America, in fact, just does have to return. Continuing with the big names, next up we have Tony Stark, Iron Man. And again, just another household name that needs to be on the rebooted Avengers. You cannot have the new Avengers team without Tony Stark Iron Man. Not only is he arguably the best engineer on the team, he's also arguably the best brains on the team. And his dynamics with characters like Bruce Banner, Captain America, and even Hank Pym now need to be showcased again in the MCU. The next member that needs to be on the team is yet again another big name, and that is Thor Odinson. Obviously, we know that Thor is one of the heavy hitters on the Avengers team, arguably being the strongest member of the team. But beyond that, I think that the rebooted MCU is a chance to get Thor right. And I've talked about this before, but what the MCU did to Thor's character was just an extreme travesty in my opinion. They took Thor, who is supposed to be the battle-hardened warrior, who has a lot of emotional depth and trauma, and they turned him into an idiot. Now, just to clarify, again, this isn't me saying that Thor can't be comedic at all, but that isn't Thor's entire personality, and his comedy most of the time stems from the cultural differences between Asgard and humanity, not because he's actually stupid. But for some reason, the MCU actually made him stupid. And I just don't understand why that was the route that they decided to go in for this character, because with a character like Thor, you could have easily given him a similar arc to the likes of Kratos from the God of War franchise. Now, obviously, Thor of the Marvel Universe was never as vicious or evil as Kratos was, but just having him work to redeem himself minus a lot of the stupid humor, I think could have been a very good arc. So hopefully after Doomsday and Secret Wars, we get true badass Norse mythology, Shakespearean Thor back into the Marvel mythos. That brings us to the next heavy hitter on the Avengers lineup, and that is none other than the Incredible Hulk, who again is another character that for some reason Marvel just decided to shit on randomly. The Hulk that we get in this new rebooted MCU needs to be a force to be reckoned with throughout his entire tenure of however long the next MCU lasts. The travesty that has been Mark Ruffalo's Hulk since Avengers Infinity War has been an eyesore to watch. Marvel really took the ultimate never say die character, you know, the guy that always yells Hulk is strongest there is no matter who he is fighting, and they compromised his entire character just for Thanos' aura. And it's like, it could have been cool if that was like what they decided to do for the very first showcase at Avengers Infinity War when Thanos beats Hulk up, and then later on in the movie, Hulk regains his confidence and then challenges Thanos again. But no, he just stayed like sissified. Until this day, he has not yet recovered. So hopefully in the rebooted MCU, we steer far away from that direction and we get back to the Hulk's roots where he's a misunderstood monster. In the rebooted MCU, I need to see Hulk throwing down with the likes of Sentry. I need to see Hulk's dynamic with characters like Thor. There's so many avenues that you could explore with this character that the MCU for some reason just decided to not take advantage of. Obviously, you could argue that some of that has to do with the rights issues with the Hulk, but even still, in the Avengers movies, they still decided to not do the Hulk justice. And by Avengers movies, I mean post-Avengers Age of Ultron. Next up on the roster, I have the likes of Hawkeye. Again, similarly to the likes of Iron Man, I think Hawkeye is just a no-brainer for the Avengers. He just has to be on the team. He's also another one of the street-level members on the team that helped to ground the Avengers as a whole. And when I say ground, I don't mean ground in the same way that Green Arrow would ground the Justice League morally. I think that Hawkeye grounds them in terms of overall physical capabilities, because there's not like a bunch of heavy-hitting tanks walking around on the Avengers, at least to the same degree as the Justice League. Continuing that trend, I would also have the likes of Black Widow on the team, obviously. Again, she's just another household name, and I don't think that you can reboot the Avengers in the MCU and leave out some of the old Avengers from the original 6, especially considering the fact that a lot of the appeal of this reboot is that we get to see what we had in the original MCU in the new MCU, but now we can have them interact with all the other factions of Marvel mythos like the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, etc. Speaking of bringing back characters that we once lost, the next character that I have on the roster is none other than Black Panther, specifically T'Challa. Obviously, the main reason as to why we didn't get much of T'Challa in the original MCU is because of the fact that Chadwick Boseman unfortunately passed. Because of this, we missed out on things like seeing his dynamics with characters like Namor the Submariner, who is his main villain. And the beauty of their dynamic is that even though Namor could be considered T'Challa's main villain, they still have an actual respect for each other as kings of their respective kingdoms. The reason why these two are adversaries is more so because of a political disagreement, more so than Namor actually being evil, even though Namor obviously has done evil things. Another thing that I also really look forward to seeing with Black Panther in the MCU now is his relationship with Storm. And again, this stems from the fact that the MCU now has the rights to the X-Men, so they will 100% be in this new MCU reboot. Seeing their marriage play out in live action and also how it could potentially tie into other major Marvel events like Avengers versus X-Men is really interesting in my opinion. So Black Panther absolutely needs to be on this new Avengers team. Another character I think needs to be on this Avengers roster is Scarlet Witch, and that's because there's so much untapped potential with Wanda's character that, again, we just didn't get to see in the first MCU. Obviously, the true scale of Wanda's power does eventually get touched on in projects like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and also WandaVision, but if I'm being 100% real with you guys, I feel like the MCU truly has to adapt the House of M storyline to give Wanda the true justice that she deserves. Obviously, the MCU just didn't have the ability to do this before because they didn't have the rights to the X-Men and the mutants. But again, now that they do, it opens up a whole new world of storytelling. And they definitely need to take advantage of this. That brings me to the next Avenger who is very important to Wanda's story, and that is Vision. I think that the MCU initially did a really great job with Vision in my humble opinion, and there isn't really much I would do differently with Vision in this universe outside of obviously recasting him and also just exploring more with his character. Obviously, if Vision is already going to be a member on the Avengers in this new universe, it would mean that the Avengers would have had to have already gone up against the likes of Ultron, which makes sense to me because I don't see them doing another Ultron movie in live action because they already did Age of Ultron. And in this universe, you could just change it so that instead of obviously Iron Man creating Ultron, you had Hank Pym do it, and then the same events sort of play out similarly. Obviously, there would be some differences like Sokovia probably not happening, but there would just be a major event that happens with Ultron. And I think Ultron should remain a threat to the Avengers post that event, because if we're not going to see that movie, I do think that we should still see Ultron again in some capacity. So if they do decide to do an Ultron movie, which I wouldn't be against, I just don't think it's likely, it would be cool to know that he already has history with the Avengers in this new reboot, and it would make sense to not redo his origin. The final character that I would add to this Avengers roster is Quicksilver. Not only do I think that we were completely robbed of Quicksilver in the MCU because of his death in Avengers Age of Ultron, but again, with the X-Men and the mutants now being able to play a role in the new MCU, I think that this is a perfect opportunity to showcase Quicksilver's history with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and also establish that corner of the mutant side of things, while simultaneously showcasing that he turned from that evil side and became an Avenger. Obviously, this was somewhat done in Avengers Age of Ultron, but again, because of the fact that Marvel did not own the X-Men in live action, they couldn't do the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants route, so they had to create an entire new story. But overall, ladies and gentlemen, if it were up to me, that is what I would want the MCU rebooted Avengers to look like. I honestly think that that's the perfect roster to start out with because it has a little bit of everything. You have your original members from the original MCU, you also have all of the original members from the comics, and you get your very good additions in the likes of Wanda Maximoff, Vision, Quicksilver, and Black Panther. And just to clarify, this is what I would do for the main roster. I would obviously want other heroes to eventually join the fold, like Spider-Man, Sentry, even Wolverine at points. Also the likes of Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, War Machine, etc, etc. The Avengers branching out into their own sort of Justice League Unlimited in the MCU is perfectly fine to me because we've already kind of seen that in the original MCU. But with that being said, that is going to wrap up this video, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Also hit that hype button if you guys have the feature available. And as always, it's been K the God. I'll catch you boys on the next one.